So let me just start. I'll try to hurry a bit up so that we don't get late for our break. So I work at the Huawei Dresden Research Center, and previously I was mostly doing more, let's say, low-level stuff in the kernel area and in some synchronization primitives. And since basically the beginning of this year, I've moved into more the upper layer of the OpenHarmony operating system. And one of the projects I've been looking into is basically Servo. Some of you may know Servo. It's a web rendering engine. And in this talk, I'll also generally first be introducing OpenHarmony, but also how we made a Servo run on OpenHarmony and why we think this is interesting. So, to start, how many people of you have heard of OpenHarmony? It's more than I expected, but so I guess maybe some more of you have heard about HarmonyOS, and let me start here maybe. So HarmonyOS is basically the operating system that's used on Huawei smartphones, tablets, smartwatches, whatever, and it's already been in the news for a couple of years that it's a completely new operating system, and some of you may have read those articles and also read that it says there that people checked and, well, our Android apps still work. And so maybe the one or the other person wonders, well, what is this? Is it just Android relabeled? And so this is one of the points I'm going to try to clear up today. And starting here, I would say that first, OpenHarmony is definitely not Android and totally unrelated. It's basically the new framework that OpenHarmony, or that also HarmonyOS apps are based on. And one key point here is that you can write an app for OpenHarmony and it runs on HarmonyOS, but also on any other third-party distributions. So basically, OpenHarmony is not just HarmonyOS, but there are also other vendors who are maintaining their own distribution, kind of like in the Linux world. There's Fedora, there's Ubuntu, and in this case, it's mostly IoT vendors or other industrial vendors who keep their own distribution of OpenHarmony and have their special use cases for it that are entirely not smartphone related. So up until now, or let's say up until the end of this year, HarmonyOS has had an Android compatibility layer, which means Android apps actually run on it. And what this also means is that basically if you have an app and you're wondering, should I make it an OpenHarmony native app? Like probably you're going to think, well, what's in it for me? And since if it runs as an Android app, you're probably not going to be very motivated to port it to OpenHarmony. And let's bring up, so basically at the end of this year, HarmonyOS will move to the next stage, which basically means that the Android compatibility layer will be completely removed. And this means that basically only OpenHarmony apps will work on HarmonyOS phones. And I'll talk about this a bit later more, but just to know, just wanted to clear up in the very beginning that indeed HarmonyOS is not just Android anymore, but it's completely new, and Android apps will not run anymore. So, and just don't have to worry too much about this picture. Basically, the OS features like everything you would need. So basically, you can bring your own, create your own device, and potentially port some drivers for it. And then you would also already have all the main things you would need, like a scheduler, some more AI subsystems, some logging subsystems. Basically, everything you would want on a mobile-oriented operating system. And one thing I just want to point out here is that there's also a kernel abstraction layer, which means that you're not, or you don't necessarily have Linux kernel as the basis here, but there's also a LightOS kernel, and on Huawei phones, maybe even also the Home kernel, which is a microkernel-based kernel. So at this point, I want to talk a bit about other OpenHarmony distributions, what they're focused on. So there are very different areas. Most of them are kind of like just starting up now because OpenHarmony has not been around for that long. But there's a lot of third-party vendors who are basically creating their own distributions, and some of those are in the mining area, some of them are in the finance area. There's a project which is focused on bringing HarmonyOS to the classroom and having some educational apps running on it. And there are also some government terminals, for example, like with some face scanning to when you enter a building, or like smart door controls, etc. And so I just want to show the slide to kind of show that it's not just a Huawei project, but there are also many third-party vendors who are interested in bringing their own distribution of this. And this is currently mostly with a China focus, because all these vendors are mostly China, but in Europe we also have the Oniro Foundation, which is together with the Eclipse Foundation and the Open Atom Foundation. They're basically working on bringing this OS, which is a distribution which is more catered to the European or Western market. And I think there will be a talk about this later today. So I already mentioned that the AOSP compatibility layer will be completely removed in HarmonyOS Next. And there has already been basically a developer preview of this for select invited developers. We're currently only open to Chinese developers since end of last year. And basically, you now have to use the new ArcUI framework, which is based on TypeScript, or like a fork of TypeScript. I'll come a bit later to what the differences are. And it basically means you actually have to rewrite your apps in ArcUI or ArcTS. And of course, this is an important key point for the whole project, because if you actually ship a phone with HarmonyOS Next, then you would expect that your favorite apps are there, right? And one key point is here that there's a huge effort going on in China right now to actually port the at least top 5,000 apps to OpenHarmonyOS, and hopefully this will also bring apart a larger library ecosystem which helps creating new apps. So one other key feature of HarmonyOS Next is also that there's actually a custom kernel, so it's not even running Linux underneath anymore. But still, it's completely compatible because there's a compatibility layer. So that basically means if your app runs for Linux with a muzzle-based libc, it will also it should run on the custom kernel. There are some minor restrictions, some C APIs which are explicitly not made available for various concerns, but I'll come to that a bit later. And yeah, so, but just want to mention, so HarmonyOS Next, the target audience in the first rollout this year will first be Chinese mainland, and I wouldn't expect it to see it on the remaining European or Western phones just yet. So, oh, I actually did not click through, sorry. Yeah, so I already mentioned the top 5,000 apps are in the process of being ported, and this is basically because Huawei did some research and saw that 99% of the time of Huawei phone users spent in 5,000 apps, which is quite significant. And so there's currently a huge porting effort going on with already 4,000 of the top 5,000 apps being ported or already being ported. And the remaining 1,000, there are also currently discussions ongoing with the developers on making it happen. So of course, this is a huge effort, and Huawei is helping out the developers to get it ported. One key thing here, I think, is also to mention that one difference is that in China, the so-called mini apps are very popular, which basically means if you have WeChat and maybe Alipay and with their mini apps or Meituan, then basically these mini apps make already a lot of apps available, just because you have this one super app, and in it you have all the mini apps just automatically available if you have the WeChat, basically. And yeah, one thing that makes porting maybe a bit nicer is that TypeScript is a language that probably many web developers are already very familiar with, and I'll come to why ArcTS or the flavor of TypeScript that we're using maybe makes it a bit of a even nicer language. So let me talk about, so I want to talk a bit about how developing for OpenHarmony actually looks like. And of course, there's an official IDE, which is basically also based on the JetBrains IDE, which is similar to Android Studio. And currently, the latest release is version 4.1, and it's available from the official release notes. Although the English release notes don't list the download link yet, so I just put the Chinese release notes here and made a screenshot so you can easily find which place you have to click. So basically, if you scroll down to the right section, you will see that there's a link for Windows, Mac, and Mac ARM. And that's where you can download the SDK and the developer. So I just want to show that it actually works. This is my phone mirrored, and it looks kind of laggy here on the big screen, but on the phone it looks more fluid, so feel free to try it out later. I mean, it's still one thing that is different here compared to, or like still missing, is Fling support. I don't know how many of you know what Fling is, but basically if you scroll on your app and you lift up your finger, then you expect it kind of to go on scrolling, but there is like no native API for that yet, and basically you just have the raw events. So if you lift up your finger, you will get no touch events anymore. And since I don't keep track yet of it, of the history, don't calculate the velocity or anything, it basically means the window stops moving immediately, which is not how you want a browser to be, but for demo purposes, it's just fine right now. Now, how do I move it back? How do I close the window now? Okay. Yeah, so there are some minor things that are not working yet, which is mostly WebGL support. I just disabled it because it led to it crashing, because I didn't implement the part yet where you have an off-screen buffer. Fling support is missing, and actually calling back to the ArcGIS, ArcGIS UI is not working yet. So basically, if you click on a link, it will not update the link, and it won't go to the new website. But those are all minor changes, and I hope to fix that and also upstream the changes to the main server repository. If you want to have a look at the sources, I put a link in here to both the ArcGIS app and my branch of Serval, so that you can have a look at the changes required if you're interested. Just be aware that it's not production-ready code, and there are kind of parts where code is commented, copy, pasted, and yeah, so it's not beautiful to look at. Now, just as a summary of what the changes that were required, the ArcUI to libserver layer was actually incredibly easy.